Hello again, everyone. This is Jed Schlackman, and in this video I'll be going a little further into the discussion that I started in another segment related to misunderstandings of infectious illness or infectious diseases and actually what actually is causing diseases. In other words, is it something that's coming purely from the microbes, from being transmitted from one person to another, or is it a process that originates primarily from within oneself, from within one's own body and field of energy and consciousness, with those microbes just playing a particular role, a particular part in a process that occurs with our biology when things are stressed or out of balance. One simple way to think about and consider how these processes unfold is to consider the role of oxygen and what happens when there's a depletion or a deficiency of oxygen. We know that the cells in our body depend on oxygen, so we're breathing in oxygen in the air, and that oxygen is helping our body maintain its homeostasis, helping it support its well-being. We also know that there are organisms which are aerobic and organisms which are anaerobic. And those two terms, aerobic and anaerobic, have to do with whether those organisms will live in an oxygen-rich environment or an oxygen-depleted environment. So microorganisms that we associate with disease or illness, which we refer to as pathogens because they're found to be active or present when a pathology is diagnosed, those are organisms that survive or thrive per se in a low oxygen environment when there's little or no oxygen, and those organisms will feed off of things like sugars and toxic elements in our body, so they don't depend on oxygen for survival. If there's above a certain threshold of oxygen, those organisms can't survive. It will actually destroy them. So one of the common types of alternative therapies that are used to help people fight infections are actually oxygen therapies. Things such as ozone, hydrogen peroxide therapies, sodium chloride therapies. And with that understanding, we can see that the environment, the balance of different elements in our body, in our blood and our body fluids, plays a big role in terms of whether microbes are active or not. So when things are in balance, then the microbes that people associate with the disease process wouldn't be able to proliferate. Oxidation is something that's occurring within our body all the time. Oxygen is breaking down microbes. It's helping with clearing out different forms of toxic waste in our body. And then our body uses antioxidants to protect the cells so that our own cells, our own healthy cells, are not harmed by the oxygen or oxidation processes. And those antioxidants are also helping neutralize the free radicals, the toxic debris that's generated by metabolic processes. So we need both oxygen and antioxidants to carry out many different processes in our body to maintain that balance or homeostasis. And when we develop some type of deficiency in either of those, that could lead to the activity of some type of microbe in a disease process. So if you don't have enough antioxidants in your body, if you're deficient in them, then your body will reduce its oxidation activity, since if there's oxidation going on and not enough antioxidants available, then that would create, in a sense, a poisoning in your body. The free radicals would start to damage your tissues and cells. So your body will adjust the activity of oxygen and oxidation depending on the amount of antioxidants that are available. When you have a lot of vitamin C, for example, then your body has more power and potential to oxidize pathogens, and that's one of the reasons why high-dose vitamin C therapies have been very useful and very effective in treating lots of infectious types of illnesses. Now, we're talking a little bit about some details of the balancing of things in our body and how that affects the activity of microbes. So we can consider, in a sense, that microbes aren't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, they're very useful for different processes in our body. And there are times when our body may be intentionally allowing or working with microbes to carry out a particular task or purpose. If you observe nature when different types of organisms are decaying, then various microbes, bacteria, fungus, and so on, start to become active to break down those decaying cells. So it's kind of like a recycling mechanism to break down the old and make way for the new. And this is happening all the time in our body too. So when we have cells that are damaged, they could be damaged by toxic elements. They could be damaged by exposure to our own body chemicals, stress hormones, things like that. So in whatever way those cells may be damaged and no longer functioning adequately, there is a cell death process that occurs, and microbes can be used to help efficiently break down those decayed cells and to allow the body to replace them to produce new healthy cells, so that we continue to function in a healthy and balanced manner. So microbes are not a bad thing. We're using them for our digestion. Many of you are familiar with probiotic supplements. So when our body isn't generating enough probiotic microbes, probiotic bacteria on its own for the purpose of digestion, of breaking down the excess material in our digestive system that we've consumed, we can take probiotic supplements to help support and enhance that bacterial activity. And if you think about the whole process of transmission of bacteria and viruses between people or between animals, it could be serving a purpose of supplementing whatever microbes the body has within itself to help the body actually more efficiently or more quickly carry out certain biological maintenance processes, certain types of cleansing mechanisms when the body is under stress, when the body perhaps has been exposed to some environmental toxins. So if we look at it that way, the transmission of different microorganisms between people could actually support our health and our adaptation to our environment. It's not something we need to fear, we need to obsessively avoid. In fact, there have been studies done looking at what happens when people are very vigilant about avoiding exposure to things in their environment that they think subject them to pathogens. So people that avoid getting out in nature, avoid touching dirt, people that are constantly spraying sanitizers and disinfectants in their environment. So when you're so aggressively trying to kill off these microbes or avoid contact with them, what tends to happen is your immune system becomes weakened and less adapted to dealing with your surroundings. And so when you do end up exposed to certain things, your body has more difficulty managing them properly, and there's a greater chance that they might start to become active and grow or proliferate out of control, so to speak. At least that's one way of looking at it. It could be that you've just delayed some type of cleansing process that your body needs to go through. So by avoiding exposure to microbes so much, when you finally do get exposed to them, your body is extra eager to use them to create or facilitate that type of a cleansing process. We often hear about the time of delay between when someone is exposed to some type of infectious organism and when they actually come down with signs or symptoms of an illness from it. That's often called an incubation period. So the idea or theory is that, let's say you're exposed to a cold virus or influenza virus, yet you're not immediately appearing sick or ill following that exposure. It might be days later, weeks later, perhaps a month or more later, when a person shows some symptoms, signs of the illness that is thought to be caused by that particular microbe. Well, if you happen to have a traumatic injury to your body, you have an abrasion, a cut, a bruise to your body, things start to happen immediately with your inflammatory response. So it's not like there's an incubation period where weeks later your immune cells start to become active, you start to experience some type of inflammation, some type of response to that injury or threat to your body. The response is occurring immediately. So with infectious illnesses, so-called, when you're exposed to a virus or bacteria per se, why is it that it would be weeks later when you see immune system symptoms, when your body is having some type of congestion or inflammation, when you have chills or fever or mucus building up, all those things that are actually symptoms of your immune system taking action to start to remove the microbes or neutralize them and halt their activity? Could it be that there's a positive purpose or intention for why your body actually allowed that particular organism to be active for a while, to do a certain job or task within your body, and then at a certain point when that job or task is done, that's the point when the immune system starts to activate itself to take some visible actions to halt the activity of the microbe, to start neutralizing it and removing it from your body. So it could be that there's some type of cleansing process occurring where those microorganisms are doing something that your body considers beneficial and useful for a while. It would only be a problem if that activity continued beyond the time where it's needed to accomplish the task. So once the task is accomplished, then the immune system activates. You might have some congestion of mucus in your body. You might have some fever, some type of symptoms of the heat that needs to be generated to halt the replication of a virus. So those are things that are your systemic immune response, your body's action that's being taken to end the activity of that particular microbe. But your body isn't that stupid or foolish. In general, it knows what it's doing. So if you are exposed to a particular microbe and it's weeks later that your body seems to be having an immune response, it's not because your body is negligent, that it's spent all that time not aware that there's a threat. It can actually be that your body was working in a symbiotic way with that microorganism, and now that that organism has finished the task that the body wished for it to accomplish, now the body is ready to halt the activity of that microbe, and it's unleashing its full immune response then. So that's something very interesting to consider, how that delay can be explained in that manner. Now, keeping that concept or hypothesis in mind, let's consider what happens with the types of illnesses that involve chronic inflammation. People often refer to these nowadays as autoimmune illnesses. So you have things like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, fibromyalgia, Sjogren's syndrome. So a variety of conditions where the body has these flare-ups of inflammation, where there's some type of immune response or activation occurring, and it's occurring fairly chronically. In other words, it doesn't permanently go away. It doesn't have a cycle where it starts and ends and it's done with. It may go through different phases of being more active or less active, but it doesn't seem to completely disappear. In that case, we can think about different stresses the body may be under that create the activations and then the remissions of those symptoms. So a person might have some type of toxic exposure in their environment, and these microbes are introduced and they start to help with breaking down and clearing out that particular toxin. And if they're efficient in doing this, then the symptoms might start to subside. However, if you're living in an environment where you're continuing to be exposed to those toxins more, then the process will just recycle and repeat itself. And so those microbes may be activated again, and then the immune response is activated, the inflammation, to help control or manage those microbes, to clear them out after they do their task. So if you're experiencing these chronic types of symptoms, you may have a pretty heavy buildup of some type of toxins in your body, or you may be chronically being exposed to toxins from your environment. And you can also be under chronic psychological stress. This is very common. And the psychological stress and the stress hormones will tend to combine with the environmental toxins, chemicals and things that are in the air, in the water, in the foods that you're consuming. So if you're continuing to be stressed in these ways and having this waste material building up in your body, then your body's going to continue to work symbiotically with these microbes to allow them to spread and proliferate in certain tissues or areas of the body where the toxins have accumulated. And then after they complete that task or role that they've been given or allowed to do, then you have the inflammatory symptoms, the immune reactions where your body is taking the steps it needs to control or manage those microbes, to keep them from going any further, to keep them from spreading and getting completely out of control and doing significant harm to your body. So there's this delicate balance that has to occur for your body to keep up with the stresses that it's dealing with. Your body is using its intelligence, its memory, and all the resources that are available to it to adapt to the stresses that it's encountering. And those stresses include the stresses in one's consciousness, psychological stresses, as well as biological, environmental types of stresses. So we tend to look at microbes as an invading enemy, but your body could view them as something symbiotic that it can use to accomplish things, whether it's for digestion or for elimination of toxins and wastes that are built up. Nature is not foolish. It has a great intelligence behind it. We just don't see the whole picture of all these things that are happening and unfolding. As I mentioned in my previous video, we're only seeing kind of a freeze frame or snapshot, and we see some type of correlation between things that are present. So we may see symptoms of our immune system being active, which we label as a disease or illness, and in concert with that, we might test and find that certain microbes are present. And then our interpretation of that could be that the microbes are something that's come from outside of our body to invade us and cause an illness. But looking more holistically, we can see that there's some type of stress, disturbance, or imbalance in our body that's naturally activated those particular microbes, bringing them this opportunity to serve a certain role, to play a particular function. And if we're able to reduce the stress and clear out the toxins, then the activity of that microbe will naturally cease and the illness will come to a conclusion. It'll go away. We won't feel sick anymore. And much of the time, this is actually what occurs. So when you have a cold or flu, something of that acute nature, as a result of the symptoms that you're experiencing, usually you'll take time to rest, to relax, to recover. So you may reduce your physical activity or mental activity. You may replenish the fluids in your body. You may take some extra supplements, some extra vitamin C and antioxidants. So you'll do things often that help expedite that recovery process. While if you do things that add further stress or interfere with your body's immune functioning, you may actually cause a prolonging of your illness. That's up to you how you choose to interpret things, how you choose to respond and care for yourself when the symptoms develop. But just be aware that the symptoms are not really the totality of the disease or illness. They're just a phase in this process. I hope that the ideas I'm presenting give you some food for further thought, further research, further logical thinking and consideration. And based upon that, you can look at all the information that's presented to the public from perhaps the news media or mainstream medicine in a different light. You can see things from a more expansive view or perspective, which gives a different meaning or interpretation to many of the phenomena that people are observing, to the various forms of data that people are collecting. I appreciate each of you for taking your time to explore and consider these topics, to seek out understanding so that you can support your own healing or perhaps assist other people in their healing process if you work in the healing arts. For those that are interested in holistic wellness, I invite you to visit my website, which is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. You can find a lot more resources in the links and education section there, and you can also inquire about the healing services that I share. For now, I want to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.